So, congratulations. I've been following this through the media, and I know I'm about 2 months late from the verdict. It's my first opportunity to see you. Congratulations on the verdict.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to say I am about 100 pounds lighter.
I can't imagine that to be true.
Still carrying the 20 or so pounds from eating and drinking my way through all of this, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I have a question for you in regards to really diving into your TED Talk. I was fascinated by a couple different things, but one of them was that there was no current legislation here in the States to really protect the consumer, to protect the citizen against cyber porn, revenge porn, cyber assault, and so forth. But Jamaica somehow had something, did you find that odd or unique?
I do find it odd, and ironically, and I have been quoted in saying this, and I even told lawmakers and officials in Jamaica, because after the verdict was, or after he pled guilty, I should say, I did speak with lawmakers there and let them know that the language, that the way that their Malicious Communications Act is written is very clear. Okay. And it would be wise of us here in the United States to adopt language that is clear, that states if someone is actively using a computer, a cell phone, any digital device to disseminate content or images or hurtful information with the intent to do harm, they are therefore guilty of malicious communications. I mean, clearly you still need to go to court to prove it, and I am surmising that, but it is very clear. And unfortunately here in the United States, as you point out, we do not have federal legislation in place to protect victims of revenge porn, non-consensual pornography, cyber sexual abuse, image abuse. The problem is we've got about 19 names for this one crime and no federal law that prohibits it. We have some states that have some statutes on the books, but even those are listed as misdemeanors at best, that carry maybe a $500 fine. So these types of crimes where victims are being exposed, whether it is their photos or videos, they really don't have a way to find justice.
And it's obvious to me that it was eye-opening to me that here in Jamaica you could find justice, but here in the States you can't. Now, I read that, is it Senator Kamala Harris has a bill, the only bill? Is that still true?
So as of now, and of course we're sometime in September 2019, a senator, now presidential candidate Kamala Harris had the one standing bill, which is called the Enough Act, in place. But Congresswoman Jackie Spear from California has written a very similar bill, which is called the Enough Act, that essentially adopts some of, it's called the SHIELD Act, which essentially adopts some of the same language from the Enough Act, but with a few changes, and the hopes is that that will pass. Basically, the Enough Act sat with bipartisan support for about 2 years, but it didn't move, and now hopefully the SHIELD Act will get passed relatively soon. Okay.
I know it. The frustrations of legislation moving forward is something you've probably dove into, and it's got to be almost impossible to watch at times. I mean, I can speak from other fields I was in, just watching how slow bills move, and especially you being personally involved with this issue, that has to be just extremely frustrating.
It's extremely frustrating on a lot of levels because I knew very early on, even though I was in court for 11 months, 13 trips to the courthouse, that all I wanted the judge to do was to give me two things. One was language that I could give to GoDaddy and Google to remove the website, because at the time they hadn't removed it and told me that I needed to go get a court order, very expensive, very long. It's what they tell a lot of people. And then I also wanted language from the judge that would force him to stop, essentially creating a protection from abuse, a PFA, right? Usually handed out very easily. Here it took me 11 months to get her to do it. And part of it was because of her not being aware of cyber-related crimes, and this, of course, being very vague, period, but then also because he was out of the country, and she felt as though, based on jurisdictional issues, that she couldn't act to protect me. And yet, I went back to court multiple times, and we found 3 court cases that we were able to use to encourage the judge to finally issue a protection from cyber-related abuse. But even at the very end, I ended up using what's called a DMCA takedown to have the website shut down, which was great because that, of course, was the thing that was extremely painful and agonizing for me. And then eventually, we went to court so many times, he just didn't show up. His attorney, I should say, didn't show up, and the judge had to do nothing but give me the case after the fact. But I knew from the very beginning that I would have to find justice in Jamaica because this was happening outside of the United States. And there is nothing on an international level that would allow any citizen to be able to use any form of legislation to protect ourselves in an international country. I just happen to be extremely fortunate that my story ran on the front page of the Jamaican Observer, a newspaper in Jamaica, and a Homeland Security officer just happened to be having coffee and read my story and reached out to me on his own time, found me and called me and said, "Need some help? Don't know if this, I'm reading your story. I'm sorry this is happening." What he wasn't aware of is the fact that I had been talking with Jamaican authorities, the police department, as well as their prosecutor's office to try and get them to get involved. And they basically dropped my case and said, "Not going to help you unless you mail your laptop and your cell phone to us." And there was no way. I work with my laptop and cell phone. And all I said, go get his laptop and cell phone. He took all of the photos and videos. They're likely on his devices. And then they said, well, then you come and you can bring them and leave them. And I was afraid to go because this man had threatened my life multiple times. So as far as I was concerned, the case was shut. I wasn't going to mail my devices, and he continued to threaten me. And, I was obviously just hoping it would all go away. But this Homeland Security agent said, let me see what I can do here. So fortunately, he arranged for me to take my devices to Homeland Security here in the United States. They kept it for 3 days, scrubbed it, took all of the evidence because I saved every photo, every text message, every video, and they were able to do a thorough computer forensic review, send all of my naked photos, unfortunately, through Washington, D.C., and then back to authorities in Jamaica. But, he was able to get that piece going and then work with the Jamaican Constabulary Force, which is basically their police department, and then their prosecutor's office to bring charges against him. They ultimately arrested him and took all of his devices. He kept all of the evidence. So they had things that he hadn't even delivered yet. He was still threatening to deliver, so it was still there. So this was a rock solid, no matter what, it would have been that. But I had all of the evidence as well, and we'd even had the shutdown website, the all of the stuff that went up on GoDaddy. GoDaddy was cooperative and provided that to authorities as well. So
that's good to hear.
Yeah,
because that was something that you made a very very direct statement in the TED Talk about. In consensual relationships, a nude picture here or a nude video clip here or whatever, that you don't have the right to share that. And it's such a... But the other thing I wanted to bring up to you and get some thought on as well is I believe a lot of young people in this country, male and female, I'm the father right now of an 18 and a 16-year-old. It's very much on my radar right now. I don't think they understand the gravity of what a simple mistake could be. Would you agree with that? Even in dating.
I absolutely agree with that. And while we can qualify 2 young adults, 16 or 17, sharing nude photos consensually, assuming that it's safe for them to do this, and we know that there are alarming rates of young people who engage in that, there are equally as many people who are married with someone they love and trust, and exchange photos or videos or what have you, and they may be married for 10 years, and then upon, a violent divorce, the spouse decides that they're going to put that out as an act of revenge. I hear from women every day like that who tell me, my husband is threatening to expose these videos that I trusted him and took. Now, so it brings up this issue, which in my case, I didn't know they were taken. I didn't pose for them.
Right.
It doesn't matter if a person is posed for them or not, if they were married or not, or however. The focus should entirely be on the person who's going to use these photos with the intent to do harm. Therein lies the crime. And unfortunately, it's twisted here in the United States. And there's so much victim blaming and victim shaming. And the victims are made out to be the culprits. Then why did you pose? Then why did you send it? Then why did you agree? That's like saying, why did you stand there and let somebody slap you?
Right. 100%.
Or abuse you.
100%.
And so when this level of victimization goes on, it only forces the victim to scammer further into silence, because no one wants to be judged this way or not believed or made to be the villain.
It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. And, and then you don't have laws that are going to protect you anyway. And so it is a very prevalent situation that happens much more than most people believe or even know is happening. And I think it's something that people, when they find the courage to use their voice, and it's not easy. It took me several months to get there, to stand up and talk about it, because it is particularly in situations where, in my case, it was done without my knowledge and with the intent to do harm, and over and over again. I mean, I have text messages that say, I'm going to destroy you. This is going out. You'll never have celebrity and credibility. There was clear intent there. That's as malicious and premeditated as someone deciding that they're going to harm someone. It's just that he did it with a device. Conversely, the same situation happens when a young person, as you point out, may be sharing some information, and they shouldn't. Clearly, we tell this to our young people all the time, but they do it without realizing the magnitude of what that is. But should they be to blame, or the person who's actually using this to do harm?
Without question.
And
the perpetrator.
Absolutely. So yeah, we have to have these open conversations, and we need to make people aware of that, and we need to particularly for the people who even think about doing this. Like, at some point, the conversations that don't happen that I really wish that would happen is that the perpetrators, if we get to them early enough, if we, and they're not always men and boys, more often they are, but these can be girls as well. But where something goes awry in their head, that they think that it's okay to do this to someone.
Right.
That conversation isn't had as often either.
Do you think it's we didn't grow up with that ability? The web wasn't as prevalent in our younger years. It just wasn't. We didn't grow up with that tool. This generation has grown up with nothing but this tool 24/7. It's ingrained in their life. It has to be a harder conversation for us to have with our children.
Well, but it's a right or wrong, Erica. It's not a I mean, yeah, we've got devices, which makes it that much easier. But if you know that by sharing someone's naked photo and they don't want you to is going to do them harm, that has nothing to do with whether you show them a Polaroid or you put it on
completely. I guess I was speaking more to maybe the more liberal nature that photos and videos are shared amongst, I don't like labels, millennials, 20s, 30-year-old people, because they've grown up with that, and whereas you and I probably learned how to send messages, and texting was something I was a late adopter on, so I didn't grow up with it. And so I do agree with you on that, is that I think also what's happened with our young people is they're so desensitized. It's not a big deal to them. Oh, so what? It's just a boob picture, or it's just a dick pic, right? Like, that is really common these days, unfortunately. And so they don't see the prevalence or the level of shame and humiliation that can bring to someone, because they're so desensitized. Everybody's doing it, right? And so, like, if everybody's doing it, then somehow it must be okay. Right.
And it isn't, as we know.
That time frame when you found out until you decided you were going to do something about it, you said it was a couple months, and going through with self-examination, probably a whole bunch of pity and horror, I get all that. What was the trigger, though? What was that one moment, if there was one? Maybe it was accumulation of frustration. I don't know. Was there a moment where you just said, I am fighting back?
Yeah. It was a series of about a day or two, and it was literally at the lowest point for me. I had, I probably still have a gray spot on my hardwood floor from just lying on the floor crying after I turned the news on one night, and I was the lead story in the city that I live in. And I was floored. I mean, I spent 20 years on TV telling news, and here I was the breaking news story. And I was fighting desperately for this not to be made public. I hadn't even shared it with my family yet. Okay. But because I reported it to police, a reporter got a hold of it, and he did the story. He even came by my house, and I said, please don't tell this. I haven't even been to court. I don't want this out. And lo and behold, it was there. That was where I think it just, I couldn't move for like 2 days. And I've never been depressed. I've certainly been very sad in my life, and I've had lots of challenges. But I would say that if I had to define that for myself, that was it. And I can remember taking a bath that one night and laying there and just sobbing and thinking like, why not even why is this happening to me? Because I know enough to know that things can happen for you and not to you. To you is being the victim, but I did feel very much like the victim. And what I identified was what I was feeling was shame. And that feeling of shame is such a debilitating emotion. And I had to identify it first off. And the shame was not that I did anything wrong, but what would people think of me? Which, in fact, was giving him the power that he wanted, because he wanted to embarrass and humiliate me. And he knew that this was going to do that.
Extorted. That was the essence of the extortion.
That was his extortion. Right. And so, he was winning. And so as I was like, I can't get this off. So now you have to understand, I couldn't get it off the GoDaddy and Google weren't shutting it down. I was in the process of going to court. I hadn't even begun what was ultimately going to be 11 months and 13 trips to the courthouse. I couldn't get him to stop. I could Google my name and see the stuff. It was just horrific across the board. And then I have this reporter and a whole newsroom who's been to this website to see all my naked photos and videos. So I was just like done. And I said to myself, why is this happening? And I just remember praying and saying, God, like what do I need to learn from this? What is this supposed to be? And I remember hearing the words alchemy, and of course, the sense of the word alchemy is all chemistry, change happening, transformation. And I kept thinking, well, maybe this is happening for me, and I kept using that. And then finally, I just remember saying to myself, then who do I need to become to get through this? Because the person that I had been was not getting it. And nothing about that was going to move me further, because I was stripped. I felt raped. I felt abused. I felt ashamed. I felt all of these things. And that woman was not going to be the woman that was going to carry me into whatever was going to be next. So that I sat with that for a while. Who do I need to become now? And that lifted some things for me. And then I remember saying to myself, you got to start by breaking the silence. Now, I'd already entrusted a very close friend who knew about this and was there helping me. But beyond that, I hadn't begun to tell my family and friends. And obviously, I'd gone to the authorities. So I started with my son. And my son and I are very close. And at the time he was 21, so a young man. But I didn't want him to feel angry and bitter, as I imagined that he might, because here's this guy doing this to his mom. And had been threatening to send flyers around his college campus. And he said to me, Mom, listen, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but you are so strong. And you taught me how to be strong. And I kind of like heard those words, strong. And then he said, and besides, Mom, he chose the wrong woman to mess with.
I thought that was so powerful in that TED Talk. That was so good. It was so good.
And it's so real. I mean, I will forever be changed by my kid's words. And when he said that, it was like, you're right. He did. Like, I just could completely forgotten anything that I'd become or done up until that point. And I felt like I grew wings. I could breathe again. I had this sense of, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to do something, and I knew I had to fight and I had to stand up. And somewhere I heard the word documentary. Now, I think people think that because I have a background in television and I've spent 30 years in the industry, that somehow I should know how to do a documentary. That is far from the truth.
Whole different animal, huh?
Whole different animal. No idea. And, I'm thinking, it's going to be like telling a news story. Not. It took me 2 years.
Okay.
I filmed a lot. I went in search of women and victims around the country.
So the journalist in you came out immediately.
That came out. That's what I knew what to use to fight with.
Okay.
I had to use the things that I knew: storytelling, interviewing. I was using a lot of my coaching skills to get myself through it, and because I am a certified coach. Right. But that was helping me personally. What I felt like I could do in terms of my weapon, if you will, was to tell a story. And so I decided I would go public, and I came back to Channel 11 here in Pittsburgh and broke my own story. I figured if he was going to...
very wise to do that.
Yeah.
Would you look back at that as a smart decision in the process?
Oh, it was a very thought out decision. It was not. It was all strategy on my part. I'll be frank and honest about it. I knew that eventually this had the potential to get in the news, and if I wasn't ahead of it, I would be scrambling behind it. And so I took my power back. I took the thing he wanted to take, which was my voice and my credibility, and I told my own story. And I made it a point to just be open and honest about what had happened. But what I didn't know was that there were thousands of other people that were experiencing this as well. And that I hadn't anticipated. And so that's also what led me to start. I knew that once I was going to go public that I would start documenting it. But I didn't know that when I went public that the phone would start ringing and the emails would start coming in, and that people were looking to me to ask, I'm going through this. What can I do? And so I quickly put up a website, 50shadesofsilence.com, that has resources available, because I didn't know what to do at the time. And, I started collaborating with other people that could provide resources and tips and tools.
The team put together?
Yes. But then just other people out there that have been in this space working, whether for cyberbullying or for other women. I want it to be a clearinghouse, so to speak, that if you got to 50 Shades of Silence, just because you've heard me talk about the story, that at least if you needed to know how to take it down, get help, we have the National Suicide Prevention Hotline on there. We also have CCRI, Cyber Civil Rights Initiative. So I wanted it to be a place where at least there would be a starting point if you were desperate and looking for help. So the website went up. I went public with the story. And of course, I was filming it all along. And, 2 years later, here I sat with, and we did a march and a rally here in Pittsburgh and collected several thousand signatures to support the bill that we talked about, the Enough Act. So I had all of this stuff that was sitting in the can. And
that was my next question. So you did all your journalism, everything you were familiar with, and all the information gathering and all the cases. And again, that was there a personal tool for you? I always wonder about journalists, experienced and very successful journalists. Sometimes the gravity of the story, and now you are getting heavy stories one after another. They have to be, which you could not only document but relate to. That had to be emotional, just hearing story after story after story.
It was emotional, but part of it, what I didn't realize is that it was actually my conduit for healing. Because I still had some level of healing to do. And I was using all of my tools that I knew to use as a life coach personally, but what I also realized was it was therapeutic, probably more so than healing, for me to sit across the table from someone and have them share the same way that I was feeling, because I didn't even have a place to share the story, and yet I knew I was hearing from other people, and we entirely related, and we could hold hands and hug each other afterwards and be there for each other, and we still are today, right? And so I banded together with women who had a very common story, and they are in the documentary, and and they're doing great, they're doing well. There is life after traumatic events, but it's in that transition in who you become that sometimes you get forged, if you will, through that process. And that's what I now see. I didn't know it then, but I'm really grateful that I could tell their stories and can show how they also transitioned through this time as well.
So all the journalistic work you did, what was the next step to take this journalistic work and then take it into the film arena, the documentary arena?
Yeah. So again, here I sat with all of this video and footage and trying to figure out, is this, 3 hours, maybe a 3-part docuseries? Is this a 90-minute documentary? What is this? And I couldn't even write. I was paralyzed for probably about 3 or 4 months, thinking, I can't start writing this because I don't know the end piece. I don't know the end game. So how do I begin? And
That's interesting.
That was and crazy, but
Sure.
I couldn't commit to putting pen to paper to figuring it out. And I can remember I was on the phone with one of my producers and I said to him, Mike, listen, I don't know what to tell you. We're just going to have to sit on this. I said, until I get, and he teases me to this day, but I always say, I have this woo-woo going on. Until the universe speaks to me and I know what I'm doing, we're just sitting on this. And he was like, okay. Now, we'd already been sitting on it for a couple of months. And ironically, about 2 months after that, I was up early in the morning. I got an email about I speak a lot. I travel extensively to speak, and I was invited to speak at an event that had been canceled a weekend in October. And right after that, I get a message from him, and he says, Darieth, take a look at NBC Meet the Press Film Festival. We're going to meet all these criteria. Check in with the woo-woo.
Did it get you there?
So I commenced to checking in with the woo-woo.
Right.
I prayed about it for a little while, and I looked at it, and I was like, okay, it says a 40-minute short. Okay, can we do this? And
a lot of material for 40 minutes.
Well, and it wasn't even that. The part that was so significant was I only had a month to put this together because I was leaving the country for about 3 weeks, and the deadline was right after that.
Of course.
I'm like, we sit on this for 2 months, and now I've got to sift through all of this video, and it's harder to write something short than it is long.
No question.
Yeah, so I will say the whole month of June and part of May, weekends literally from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m.
Wow.
Saturday and Sunday, several weekends, I sat beside Mike Whitland, who's one of the producers. Amy Wright is in New York. She also helped to write as well. And then Viv McGrath, who's actually in Hong Kong. And so I was doing hours with her in Hong Kong.
You love the web, right?
Right, love the web.
Collaboration's easy
Collaboration. We were doing stuff from New York to Hong Kong to Miami.
Very cool.
Yeah, and then finally I went to Miami, or actually Boca, and sat with Fernando Barron, who he had the toughest job because he had to edit all of this stuff. So we pulled about 8 or 9 really, really long days, and we got it done. And it's 37 minutes long. Yeah.
Was it I can't imagine how hard that would have been. What stories to choose, what content. That had to be very gut-wrenching at times.
It is. And I still wake up some nights thinking, we should have put that in, or we could have did this. It's really tough when you have that much stuff and you've got to narrow it down to 37 minutes. And a lot of people I interviewed didn't even make it in the film.
Right.
And then, we knew we wanted my story to be the spine.
Oh, sure.
I will say that we did 5 days of filming last year that culminated around the march that I did here in Pittsburgh from the steps of the City County building to Point Park University. And that next morning I woke up and I remember saying, we're going to a studio today. We're going to go sit. And we sat at Studio Me, and I said, sit me down in front of a camera and I'm just going to tell all the story in a confessional booth. Thank goodness we did that because I've wrapped the story around that. And it was just one of those things that it worked out for us. So I'm really glad that worked because it helped me give focus to when I didn't have the focus to figure out how to do it. And beyond that, I don't want to give too much more away because it's a really interesting, it is a documentary. So in the way documentaries go, obviously, it's not a feature length film. But what I've also discovered is it's art. And I could create it the way that I wanted to. And it didn't have to meet, especially as a first-time filmmaker, I could make all the mistakes I wanted to. So it didn't have to meet anybody's agenda of what it needed to
Good
do.
for you.
It just needed to be the way I wanted to tell the story.
Good for you.
And I'm proud of it. I'm really, really, really proud. I'm proud of it because I wore the hat of director, producer, and talent. Next time I'll just be talent.
Yeah, that was one of my first the bullet points I had for this is like, you did it all.
Yeah.
And you had a great team, but you still, you did it all. That was,
Yeah.
So distribution's going to be, are you still working out final distribution?
Yeah, I don't know final distribution because I committed to doing a film festival, which ironically I just was told 2 days ago we did not get accepted in.
Okay.
It's, I thought I was going to be extremely disappointed about that because I really thought that this would be great for NBC Meet the Press. We met all of the criteria, but I get it. I mean, there are thousands of other people that are submitting, so it's okay. I'm grateful because it was the one thing that got the woo-woo
Got the woo-woo
down
back.
low, right? And I'm done, right? So I'm happy about that. But because of that, I chose to submit to several other film festivals, and we were selected as an official screening in Las Cruces, New Mexico, at Border Scene. So that's great that we have that one. And I've submitted to all of them. Sundance. I mean, I'm going big, low, up, down.
As you should.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, let it run the film festival route, and likely do several small private screenings for the director's cut as a fundraiser because I have exhausted all funds possible doing all of this because it was my project, so I pulled out a credit card.
Sure.
But my plan is to do some fundraisers, and the way to do that would be to offer some private screening and then roundtable discussion with people to talk about it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, so whether they're at churches or community
We
centers.
go city to city and do that?
Yeah, anybody who wants to, host a director's cut screening and, invite a few people in.
DariethChisolm.com, by the way.
Right, yeah. 50shadesofsilence.com.
50shadesofsilence.com. Yep.
Yeah.
I've been to both websites.
Yeah.
I've been to both.
So,
they can reach you on both, though,
yeah, they
right?
can reach me on both.
Okay.
But after that, obviously, I'll be looking for distribution. And whether that distribution is through something that would be as exciting as a Netflix or Amazon or Apple TV. If that doesn't happen, then, obviously, because it's my film, I can make it available, continued available for screening and, from the website so people can continue to do that.
That might lead me into my next direction with you. And this might be a question you might not have been asked in a while. You puzzled a whole bunch of wonderful fans of yours in Pittsburgh in 2013 when you walked away after 20 years of our favorite news personality. I'm looking at then what you launched, and I would have to say that you were an earlier adopter of the new media, which is what this show is, web-based media. You believed in it at an early age.
I did.
An early age of the media format. Can you talk a little bit about how that decision was? Because it had to be hard to walk away.
Yeah. Well, when I left Channel 11 News, I'd had about 20 years or so under my belt I stepped away for a couple of years, a few years before that, but I walked away with the full intention to do a few things. One was to publish my book, Hustle, Why Now is the Time to Unleash Your Passions, to get into more public speaking and motivational speaking. And then I also started one of the first video podcast shows on iTunes. And good thing that I did it then. I sat #1 on iTunes for almost 3 months.
I did not know
So
that.
I enjoyed listenership from around the world at a time when podcasting was very early. I was way ahead of the curve.
No, was that Heart and Hustle? Am I having
Hustle and Heart TV?
Heart. Yes.
Yep. Hustle and Heart TV, which you can still watch on YouTube
and very good episodes, I might add.
Thank you. And still see or listen to on iTunes. Yeah, I left it up even though it's very old. That's the beauty of podcasts, is that it is evergreen. It will exist for as long as it's on the server.
It's my favorite word.
Evergreen, yes.
And I took a little nod from watching your shows too. This is a story-based show. Our guests have the opportunity to tell their story, and it becomes evergreen. And I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think that's good because it can always be relevant to that particular person.
And it's new to the person who's coming to it, which is part of the reason why I chose to leave all 57 episodes up and available. And
they were so well done. They were videoed so well, edited so well.
Yeah,
I learned that you played Galaga when you were a kid as well too. I learned that.
Galaga.
Galaga.
I did.
You paper route money, right? Because I got a similar story with that. I saw that.
I played Galaga. Absolutely. I loved arcades.
You have to understand that. You're going to have to go watch the episodes.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I did, ironically, what I did for the documentary. I found some extremely talented videographers, and we would do in this case, 3-woman shoot because they were female videographers, but we would go on location, take 3 cameras, and sit in a person's office or their home and tell the hustle and heart of an entrepreneur. And that's what I really wanted my audience to experience, is what does it take for this person to build a multi-million-dollar company or to set sail across the country or whatever, whatever my guests desires were as entrepreneurs. And I loved it. It was a beautiful way for me to talk about all the things I was passionate about, because I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, but still to meld in television and obviously take advantage of this new form media at the time, podcasting and video podcasting. So it was great. It was wonderful.
You were definitely ahead of the curve. There's no question.
Yeah.
And some of the larger national video podcasts now, you were ahead of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question about that. So I want to commend you in that regard, because that's part of the inspiration of what I'm doing, and some of the way we're editing our show is from your show now.
Well, great.
So,
well, I'm happy to know that my pioneering efforts have paid off, because
no
you
doubt.
have a beautiful studio here, and I absolutely love it, and I'm excited to be your guest.
Well, awesome. Did you, was it tough walking away? Was it from Channel 11, or did you have? Did
that was
your
the second time I walked away.
2000 to 2004 ish, maybe.
Yeah, you did your homework.
Yes, ma'am. I'm an amateur journalist. I'm a show host, but I'm an amateur journalist.
Yeah,
I had to be. What do I have in here today?
Yeah, I walked away the first time when my son Trey was 5 or 6. He was going into first grade, and I was working from 3 to midnight. 3 to 11, and I just knew that I couldn't, I would put him on the bus at 9 a.m. He'd get off at 3, I'd go to work. I just could not do that to him, and I felt like those were so important, those early years. And so I at that point I had a home-based business, and so I was running my business then from home, and I spent about 4 years at home, and then I got a call and a request to see if I wanted to come back to the station, which is rare. I mean, those things don't happen in this industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, to quit a job and then be asked to come back to a main a main anchor position. I was obviously very humbled and grateful for it, but I was still at questioning if I really wanted to do that, because by then, I think he was about 8 or 9, but he also was maturing into a young man that I felt like, I could go back to working that schedule and still, be able to still be his mom.
Sure.
And the station was very gracious in affording me the opportunity to go home between shows, so that helped.
Got it.
And it was going very well. And then when he was 16, 17, I decided again that I would leave, and this time for him again, because he was going into his senior year of high school. Okay. And, I knew that once he left, that he'd be gone to college, and then that would be it. And I wanted to continue building a business that I had started, but I also wanted that time home with him. And I also wanted to be in the stands with him for his football games. I was missing all of his football games, frankly. And he was going into his senior year at Central Catholic playing football. And so I promised him that January that I would build my business to a certain point and get myself financially to a place where I could afford to leave. And I was married at the time, so obviously my husband at the time was there. But I wanted to do that for me. I knew I had a number in mind and I had a goal in mind. And financially, I met that goal. And I made that promise to him, and I kept it. And I was in the stands for every one of his games in his senior year of high school. And of course, he went on to college at Vanderbilt and has since graduated. But yeah.
The entrepreneurial bug, when did you get that?
Oh, when I was like 8 years old.
Okay, so that gives us the perfect segue, because I really am interested in in where you got your start, your history, parental influences. I would love to hear your story.
Yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur, and I say this in my book, and I've often shared this story, is that, my first business was an orange juice stand. It wasn't a lemonade stand. It was orange juice with Kool-Aid in it, because it had to be different.
And that was certainly super sweet.
And that wasn't even the best part. The best part was I got the kids in the neighborhood to also sell my orange juice on their corners.
She was scaling.
I was scaling. I was leveraging. I knew the power of like having multiple locations. You know, like this brain of mine was going at 8. And then I had a couple of paper routes. I sold encyclopedias. A lot of that was due to the fact that we were broke. I mean, my mom was raising 3 kids by herself, and then we ultimately ended up adopting another kid in the neighborhood. So there were 4 of us, and my mother worked as hard as she could, but we also had to make money to have the things that we wanted. I didn't, I guess at that time when you're young, it's fun to you. You don't see anything. For me, I turned that always into this quest of not only making the money, but of doing something and being of service. I always saw it as that. My mother also was always a big dreamer, and she always, told us to dream big and to think big. And that was always a part of me. And I also loved writing short stories. So, I'd spend my days in school, and then I was either throwing a paper route to make extra money or, selling somewhere where I was making some extra money. And then I wrote a lot at night. I wrote a lot of short stories. And so I knew that I would be a journalist.
Okay. You just knew that, though. That was pretty much, you had determined that by the time you were junior high, senior high, that's what you were going to do.
When I was in high school, I actually had a column in a newspaper on the east side of Detroit called the East Side Citizens
Not
Noon.
the school paper, a real newspaper.
A real newspaper.
Wow.
It was called Teen Voice.
Okay.
Yep. And I wrote about things that impacted teens in my neighborhood. I found some of those clippings not long ago, as a matter of fact. I had my own little column. It was called Teen Voice.
That's
I was
very
16.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. And so, and obviously I had strong aspirations to go to college, but that was not going to happen. I mean, we didn't have the money for that to happen. And so I'd applied for a lot of different schools, but ultimately I ended up getting accepted to Wayne State University. And I'll share something with you, and this is something that I've only shared one time since this just happened, so this will be something
thank you.
new. Yes.
Thank you.
When I was wrapping up filming a couple of months ago, and we literally I pulled out all of these boxes, and I was looking for photos to include in the documentary.
Okay.
We found all these photos. I packed them up, but just as I was putting a box away, this one photo fell out and it slid across my hardwood floor. And when I walked over to pick it up, I leaned and I immediately remembered this day. It was an old tattered photo. I was 17 and I was kneeling next to Rosa Parks.
Oh my gosh.
Rosa Parks gave me my scholarship to college.
Really?
Yes. And so this photo.
How about that?
Yes. And while she didn't give me the money, she presented me with this certificate.
Right.
And this is the day that I wrapped my film. And I remember that day being about getting a scholarship to go to school, to use our voice as a sense of freedom and of storytelling. And what was I just doing in that moment as I was wrapping my documentary? And this picture fell out onto the floor. So it's on my cell phone. I'll share it with you. But
that's definitely a sign.
Yeah, but it was because of that journalism scholarship that I was able to go to Wayne State University and get a degree. I started very early in television. I actually worked at a station called WGPR, and at the age of 20, I had a talk show. And
you had your own talk show? I had
my own talk show.
At 20.
Called Strictly Speaking.
Okay.
We could get 60 guests in the audience, and I'd have a panel. It was like Oprah. But I was 20, literally.
Oh, that had to be unique.
It was unique. Yeah, it was unique. And there is a museum in Detroit now that that has a lot of the archival footage from WGPR. And by the way, it is was the first owned and operated African American radio and television studio in the country.
The whole country.
The whole country.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it obviously has a great deal of history.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's
It's
where I was
historic.
working. Yeah, it's historic. So they have pieces there. But when you go there, you actually can see me at 20 doing one of the shows.
What was the name of the talk show?
That was called Strictly Speaking.
Strictly
and
Speaking.
I also filled in, and I would anchor a show called Morning Magazine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wasn't even out of college yet. And that's what got me my my start.
Okay.
And I went to Dayton, Ohio, and was there for 3 years, and then I came here to Pittsburgh, February 1993.
93. Do you remember that? With your first impressions of the city? Had you been here prior, before the job?
I came here. No, I'd never been here prior to. I flew in, came through the tunnels, fell in love with the city.
Okay.
I was 23 at the time, and I was like, oh, the skyline, loved it. Interviewed, got the job, came back, decided to move. I was coming here to work, but couldn't get in because that blizzard hit. They hired me in February. They hired me in February, but my first day of work was the March 93, what was that, St. Patrick's Day.
Yes, that was the blizzard of all blizzards.
I was scheduled to work that Saturday, and I was home in Detroit with my family because I was transitioning from Dayton, waiting to come here, and I couldn't because the turnpike was closed down, and I couldn't come. Everything, yeah. So I ended up coming into where I had to call off.
Oh my
for my first day of work.
Oh my gosh.
Because I couldn't get into town.
Oh, that's a good excuse.
Yeah, it was a good excuse. But yeah, when you say, "Do I remember?" Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I bet.
I bet. That was when I came. I blew into town.
Along with the storm.
Right.
Just right after the storm.
Right.
When did you feel at home in Pittsburgh? Do you remember?
Not long after that.
Okay.
I love Pittsburgh. I absolutely love Pittsburgh. It is home for me, although I don't technically live here anymore.
Sure.
But, when you spend this much time in a city, it really is. And I can't go any place without people recognizing me and remembering me. And that warms my heart. And it really feels good. I mean, when you've been on TV for 20 years, people obviously know your name and face. And because
the voice.
And the voice, yeah. But because I also, I come back. I have a show now called CBS Eye on Health on KDKA. And then also on WQED, a show called IQ Smart Parent. And it's actually syndicated to 100 cities on PBS. So it's nice that...
IQ Smart Parents. Give me a synopsis of that show.
We primarily, it's a half-hour show where we invite parents and educators who are concerned and or focused on education for children. And so we look at a variety of different things. We spend a lot of time talking about STEM and STEAM. We do a lot on digital media. So anything that has to do with really helping our children to love learning and love education.
Okay. How often does those two shows bring you back to Pittsburgh, generally?
We probably film about 4 or 5 times a year, and we can about 2 or 3 at a time. So, yeah, I come back often for those. And then I have several clients here, coaching clients, lots of other projects. I'm often asked to come and speak. And so I'm in the city a lot.
And you're really enjoying the speaking, aren't you? It's just so part of you. As watching on video, multiples preparing for this show, you are, if I know a natural speaker now, it's you. And it just seems like it just flows from you. Are you at home on that stage?
I am. What's interesting is this is very conversational. And certainly if I was on stage, I think I would. We're talking. I don't feel like I'm being interviewed.
Thank you.
Feels,
I've been a success so far in this one.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm also not on camera where it's a different, delivery and not on stage. And so it's nice to do podcasts and talk this way. Stage is different. I do love being on stage. I love the opportunity to not only share my story, but to impact an audience and to hopefully create a shift in their thinking and in their feeling, depending on what the topic is. And as a speaker and as a public speaker, while I can speak on a lot of different topics, I choose them carefully depending on where I am. It also has allowed me to transition into the style of coaching that I'm doing. And so I focus heavily on what I call the art of storytelling and the business of storytelling. And a lot of my clients understand the value of leading with their story, not only just from the stage, but even in their own branding and their promotion of their business, to really come from a place of letting their story be what people connect with, not just their product or their bottle of water or what have you. There's a story behind why this water, came from certain springs and your family owned the springs, right? So it's that level of storytelling that I work with my clients to really use, not only from their marketing and branding, but on stage and then in the media. And obviously the media is like it's what I love doing, is helping my clients understand being on podcast, in magazines, on television programs, wherever they can create more visibility for their business and their brand.
And it's so competitive now.
It's very competitive.
This is the new media to me. I mean, I love the fact that this show in particular, we're not sponsored. There's no commercial. There's no reins on me. We can talk about what we want to talk about. And I think that's, and you came from a television environment where there are those restrictions and everything's being timed out and you get into a routine. So when you left that and started your own thing, the freedom had to be really amazing, wasn't it?
It was amazing, but I will tell you, it was a little rough for me to get into because I spent so much time in a box and so much time with things being so-called perfect, whatever that is, right? You've got lights and camera and makeup and hair and a script and all of these things that it's all formulated. You know what it is. And of course, we know the beauty of podcasting is that you don't have all of that and you can speak freely and uncensored and be opinionated if you choose and controversial if you choose. All of those things avail itself to mediums like this and even, YouTube channels these days and people using Facebook. So I had to learn to do that. And I think most people think because I came from TV, it would come naturally. The other thing is that they, stations typically own the brand, own the name and the face of their talent. And you
help me understand that a little bit.
Well, because you sign a contract that says that, your name and your face and your brand belongs to this particular station.
I did not know that.
Yes. And so you definitely need to have everything checked off and be looked over through whatever your managers are at the particular station, which is wise for a station. I completely understand that. It doesn't give talent, however, a great deal of freedom. And so when you do step off and step away, it's like, oh, I can, finally be, and then you have to think about it. Well, now how do I do this when I'm so used to being in this restricted environment?
Sure.
But it wears off quickly.
You didn't seem to have any problem adapting to it at all.
Yeah, no. But I'm very creative, and as you can tell from my various projects, I don't let much grass grow under my feet. And part of it is because life is short, and I believe that we're all here to play a larger role and to live out our purpose and go for our largest dreams and our desires. And there's a lot of failure and mistakes that come with that, but there's also a lot of opportunity to win. But if you don't do anything, then none of that is available to you.
Yeah.
So, I want to be able to experience it all. And to the degree that I can dream something up and create it, whether it's a podcast show, video podcast show that's way before its time, or one thing we didn't talk about and we don't have to, but my aerial fitness studio that was extremely successful. And
well, I'd like to hear about it.
Well, it was called Full Body Fitness Club. And I opened that 9/10/11 in Brentwood in the South Hills of Pittsburgh. And we brought aerial fitness to a neighborhood that didn't have any form of fitness, but obviously very different. And we taught everything from lyra and trapeze and pole dance and yoga. I ultimately ended up in a partnership with Reebok and Cirque du Soleil to offer two very extreme forms of fitness called Jukari Fit to Fly and Jukari Fit to Flex, which were only offered overseas. And I went about outfitting my ceiling to make sure that we could offer them. So we became the first studio in the United States to offer that. So I was way ahead of the curve. And then all of a sudden I started watching on, like the housewives of Atlanta and Beverly Hills. They were going to, circus school and, a pole studio to learn to, and pole dancing is a lot of fun and is great exercise. And we did it with the intent for exercise, obviously. But so I did something that was very off the cuff and early then, but is now very popular.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You're an early adapter there for sure.
And it was because I dreamt that up. I was like, this would be really cool to have here. Now, how do I do this? I'm never afraid to ask myself how. Just like with the documentary, I didn't know how to do a documentary. I just did what I knew failed forward, but we got it done. So
there was a business philosopher years ago. You may have heard of him, Jim Rohn, and someone asked him through his career, Jim, when's enough? Because he was in his late 70s and still very active. He says, we're here for a finite period of time to make as much as we can, to contribute as much as we can, to create as much as we can. So am I done, or do I have enough? No, I want to do as much as I can till the good Lord takes me.
Absolutely.
And that's always, for decades, have always been with me. And that's where my entrepreneurial, I think my bent comes from, besides having a pretty good mom and dad as well that believed in me. But I think just the opportunity to be creative and to take action. But again, and I'm sure this is part of your coaching, is you need to help folks see that they have to take action. And that has to be one of the tenets of what you do. But I'm saying it's got to be a struggle, right?
Yeah, I have 5 tenets. That's interesting that you say that. It's like, you want to be successful, you've got to do these 5 things. Vision. Without it, I mean, you can't do anything unless you are very clear about what it is that you want to be doing. You don't have to have all the answers. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't even have to have the hows, but you have to have a vision and really be clear and have some clarity around what you want to do. Strategy. Strategy is everything. Without it, how do you make the vision happen? And so to the degree that you don't have the strategy to make the vision happen, there is no success. System, structure, and support. Most things take system, structure, and support, and every business has those. But if you think that you're going to have success on shaky ground, it likely will cave in. So what system, structure, and support do you need to have in place? You need to have a roadmap. And whether it's a roadmap that somehow has been clearly defined through those 3 things that we talked about, or you travel someone else's roadmap, because I don't believe in reinventing the wheel, even though I have.
Agreed. Well, you have in certain instances,
instances,
sure.
But those things that I can take the shortcut on and follow someone who's successful, I'm happy to do it.
It's just good business.
Yeah. So having a roadmap to travel on. And the 5th and probably the most important thing is the ability to make a decision. You have to make a decision. And when you don't make a decision, that's making a decision. You've made a decision. And most people fail at that point. They can get all of those things together, but they won't get off go. And
why is that?
I don't know. And I have sat on things before, so I understand that. There's fear.
The failure?
It's sometimes the fear of failure. Sometimes, ironically, sometimes it's the fear of success. I think for most people, it's the fear of not knowing how.
What if it works?
Right. And that's just it. You got a 50-50 chance. What if it works?
And then what?
Right. And so, this inability to make a decision is what I see more people, that's what keeps them stuck and stalled. And to the degree that you can make some decision, it's better than not making anything. I sometimes think, too, that if you did that first of the 5 things that I talked about, you'd be much further along than if you did all 4 of those other things.
So put 5, number 1.
Right.
Because it takes a decision to take action.
Exactly.
Whether it's the start of the vision, it still is a decision.
It still is a decision. So it is perhaps the most important thing of all of those 5 things. So
it has to be very satisfying, I would assume. You're such an from what I've been able to see, such an all hands on deck kind of trainer, kind of coach. The video conferences you're doing. Video is such a huge medium on the web now, especially for small businesses. I'm a realtor. My realtor practice quadrupled at minimum once I really adopted the fact that, hey, I'm not too bad behind the camera, but I could convey to my customers. I could speak directly to them. It's more genuine and it's more real. And I do see more people going to videos, maybe reluctantly, some of them, but it's like anything else. You have to learn. You have to practice. Would you not agree? But you agree in the importance of video?
Oh, video is hugely important in marketing. People connect, obviously, to someone that they can see and that they can hear. And so if you can be on video, albeit imperfect, if that's the case, do it, because people want to see your eyes. They want to hear you. They want to feel you. They can see the expression.
Trust.
They can trust you. And know, like, and trust factor goes way up when they have a visual picture of you in some way, and being video, not just a picture, I should say. Obviously, then the next best medium would be audio. Let them hear your voice. Let them hear what's going on. And then, of course, if you're printing something, that's great, but all statistics show that video helps. I will also say that, nowadays people are so busy, and there are so many things that are vying for our attention that in order for you to cut the noise and to get above, you not only have to have a great message, and you have to have great marketing, and you need to be using video, you have to be using storytelling, but you also have to be clearly aware of who you're talking to, because you can't just be talking to the masses, or you get drowned out. So the languaging and the conversation really needs to be narrowly directed to your ideal client or customer. And if you can do that in your storytelling, and if it all goes with everything that you're doing with branding and video and everything else, that's how you get them.
And so they all those parts have to be working together. But it does, I think it, for me anyways, once I defined my target client and I knew that client base, the likes, the wants, then targeting the rest of it became easier. But until I defined that, I was kind of just shouting into the abyss at times, and the success wasn't there until I really understood who my client was.
Right. And people, I made the mistake for a very long time assuming that it would just make sense to be very broad, and I would hear it all the time, get rich in your niche, niche, make sure you're, and I'm like, well, I could tell people 19 different things. I mean, come on, I got this varied background. And what
There's the ego.
Right, exactly. The ego was getting in the way, right. And then what I realized, what I really, and in fact, which was really interesting, is when I first started coaching, I actually was helping people. I was coaching on how to develop a podcast. Okay. So I had a lot of clients coming to me about developing their podcast, the content, not only the technical pieces of it, but obviously what's the content of the podcast, who are you going to be directing, just getting clear on those things, which I love doing. I do with my clients anyway. But what I really love doing, and it's what I think I've always been doing, is storytelling. Is what I wrote short stories about. And then when I realized there is a market for that, for business owners who want to be able to tell their signature story effectively from the stage in media, and have that also be the catalyst for growth for their business and their other products, it clicked for me because I've spent all my life interviewing and telling stories. So when I'm working with my clients, my ear is trained for it. I can help them pull it out very quickly, where they might be sitting like, I've got 99 stories or I've got 0 stories. I can help them quickly get to it and narrow it down. And craft it. I mean, that comes from 20, 30 years of telling stories as a journalist.
Right.
But I get to bring my coaching in, because my coaching has allowed me to evolve into a place where that allows me to help them see those 5 elements that I talked about. Really, and I've been in business for so many years with multiple different businesses, so that piece comes in. So I'm a fairly round coach, if you will. Right. I'm not just someone who went and got a certificate. I can take all of my years of experience and I bring that together to the table when I coach my clients.
I think what I'm hearing from you, though, is the message needs to be concise, and it needs to be a story. It needs to be personal and passionate. Is that right? Because every business owner, every entrepreneur has a story. We're all usually starting with an idea, and we may have finally gathered enough courage to go do it. But there's always unique stories within that story that can be concisely told. And I do it with my clients. I was in the guitar business and it ran its course, and now I decided to be a realtor. Once I embraced it and I was able to get it under like a minute, 90 seconds, and it was real and genuine, and I was able to convey it in a way where I thought the clients believed it because it was true. Everything changed for me.
Yeah.
But it was hard to come along on my own to figure that out.
Yeah.
So getting someone like yourself would have been a lot easier for me.
Yeah. And even more so if you decide that you want to take that and now leverage that story on a stage to promote your business versus spending the kind of money that those of us who run Facebook ads or do
That's
online,
me.
right? It's crowded online, and it gets those. You get lost in all the series of posts that are coming up, and that's not to say that online marketing isn't important.
But
it is
changing the rules.
It changes the rules all the time. There is nothing better than going and getting on a stage or presenting in front of a group of people at a workshop or at a conference or at an expo, and and having that audience listen to you.
Captive audience.
A captive audience, especially if it's an audience of your ideal clients and customers, and not only being able to tell your story, but using that as a way to leverage your products or services and then selling those from the stage. I find that closing rates increase significantly because they got to experience you face to face. They heard you, they watched you tell your story. You know, if you're smart, when you get off stage, you'll get into the audience and give some hugs and shake hands and connect with people, exchange business cards. It's what we grew up doing, which is networking, but now doing it from the stage.
Right.
And so, you know, I am always encouraging my clients to get as much stage time as possible. And we're not talking stages where it's 500, 5,000 people, albeit that's great. But, you know, just at your Rotary Club, if need be, is important to getting out and meeting. And I don't know what happened. I mean, you know, maybe depending on who's listening, the generation that they're in. But, you know, 10 years ago, the shift to online got us all in front of our computers and away from networking. And now we're realizing we've got to go back to that because we're missing that face-to-face and that opportunity to connect in community.
And I think there's room for both. I think with the right online and the right digital platforms, in conjunction with the authentic nature of that face-to-face, that storytelling, that's the utopia. Merging those two directly. I mean, that's kind of where you want to be right now, I would think, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why my focus has been and will be ending 2019 into 2020, along with obviously getting the film out and working from that capacity, is I'm hosting several retreats. They're called The Art of Storytelling. It's called All Rise, The Art of Storytelling. And then Off Stage, which is the the business of storytelling. And so it's what you do off stage that matters most. And so a lot of my clients really do need to put in the system structure and support to growing their business, and that's off stage, the art,
personal connectivity at that point. You could go on stage and hit a home run, but if it ends there for you, you really haven't maximized what you could have, correct?
Right. And so off stage is all about making sure that even if you're promoting and selling from the stage, what is the long game? How are you going? Because they may not be ready to buy from you that day.
Right.
But if they're not in your database and you're not nurturing them via email or providing additional content or information or value and keeping your product and service in front of them over the long game, you may miss them. I have people to this day, 3 years later, who heard me speak in Denver or someplace else that will finally call me and say, I've been in your database. I think I'm ready to coach with you now. And it was 3 years ago. And they'll tell me, I heard you at an event.
Right.
And so, you know, email marketing is, you know, people get tired of that, but it's still important. It's as important as doing marketing online. And to whatever degree you can stay in front of your community and provide them with value is important as well.
I'm so impressed because I think when you hear of a coach, a business coach, I've run into some proclaimed coaches, but it was very narrow. It was usually very channel specific, if that makes any sense. And there's what you just conveyed here is a very broad-based approach of tying it all together in a marketing plan.
Yeah, they all go together. That's absolutely right. I map roadmap. Remember roadmap? So I have a roadmap that when I work with my clients, is that you really do need to have all of those pieces in place. I can help you with your speech. I can help you with your storytelling. I can help you with your stage presence. Beyond that, if we've got a product or service that we're selling as part of that story, we need to make sure that's ready to go too. That needs to be packaged. How are you delivering it? What's the website looking like? Do you have, you know, an email sequence in play? All of those pieces. And I get to also help you with media.
Right.
So how are we going to get media for your message? And what do we need to do to make sure that you are being featured on podcasts or in magazines or on television programs with that story or with that product or service? So, you know, I was able to take all of my life's work to develop a coaching service for clients that literally can take them from one end to the other.
I see that.
If in fact that's what they're looking to do.
I see that.
And, you know, I do it in a couple of different ways. I do it privately. A lot of my clients work with me privately. I host intensives. I also do retreats where it's 2 or 3 days and it's workshop and very hands-on. And then I have a membership community, Speak, Serve, soar.com, where if nothing else, you can, learn from the other experts that I've partnered with who are providing content, and you can go and learn on your own, because I know people learn in different ways.
Sure.
So whether it's face-to-face,
Sure.
private coaching, or on your own in a program, I want to make sure that I can service my clients in whatever way they learn best.
This was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, we talked about a lot.
This was great, though. This is great. I'm again, the last 2 minutes in my brain, I'm going, you really should take a look at the realtor community and maybe be a good potential defined market for you there.
I will.
Maybe
Thank
we're going to talk about this off camera. I think
Absolutely,
so too.
yes.
Darieth, it's been wonderful.
It has been wonderful.
Thank you.
And I
hope
so
at
much,
some
Eric.
other time you come back and see me again.
Absolutely, I will. As a matter of fact, I'm planning in the spring, after we run the film festival route, to have some community screenings here in Pittsburgh. So if I can come back and talk about that and invite people.
Without a doubt.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Oh, I forgot we had cameras. That's right.
Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.